I'm Alex Rockwell. This is a book that I sell. It's called 120 Fingerstyle Arpeggio Studies. Subtitle, From Mauro Giuliani's Studio per la Chitarra, Opus 1, transcribed into modern notation. These are the 120 right-hand studies from the Italian guitarist and composer Mauro Giuliani that I have transcribed into a hybrid notation of my own making. These are bread and butter for classical guitarists, but I've always felt they're excellent for developing fingerstyle chops in general, so I've put this together with the goal of making them more inviting to aspiring fingerstyle players who are not necessarily of the classical persuasion. There's a good chance you've seen one of my ads for this book. It's a popular product of mine, and feedback on it has been overwhelmingly positive. Something I've learned about selling things on the internet is that people will tend to ask questions about your product if they're skeptical or they don't understand something about it. Go figure. And with this book in particular, I feel like I answer the same questions about it all the time, which tells me two things. One, people really need to start skimming the comments to see if someone else already asked their question. Two, the questions I receive are ones that, despite my best efforts, don't have answers that are self-evident on the ads themselves. So, let's do an FAQ. They're all the same two chords? Yes. Every single one of the exercises in this book alternates between arpeggiations of C major and G7. Just 1 and 5 in C. Giuliani wrote them that way. I don't believe he ever said why, but I think the reasons are obvious. The focus of the exercises is the right hand, so what you play with the left hand doesn't matter a lot. By doing it all on C and G7, you at least have something halfway musical to play rather than just using open strings. It also highlights various elements of good voice leading. Even though the chords are all the same, the patterns with which you arpeggiate them are different, so different nuances come out. But you don't have to use those chords. You can play whatever chords you like. You can even use open strings, which is usually a good idea anyway if you're just starting to work out one of the patterns. Regardless, I usually recommend sticking to the prescribed chords, at least at the start. As the patterns get more comfortable, start venturing out. Does it have tabs? I don't read music. On principle? Or this is part of the reason I transcribed these studies in the way I did. Does it have tabs? Yes, but also no. In my exercise books, I usually put everything in combo standard notation and tab, but in this one, the tab staff shows the right-hand fingering instead of the left. P, I, M, A are the standard letters used to indicate the fingers of the right hand. This right-hand tab is that made-up notation I mentioned earlier. It shows which fingers play on which strings. The right hand is the whole point of these exercises, so by placing it on its own staff like this, it provides a crystal clear visualization of where to put your fingers. It also invites the player to apply these patterns to whatever chords they like. But what about the left hand? To get the notes there, you still have to read the top staff, and it includes fingerings to help you. In addition, there are 2 fretboard diagrams in the preface that show the C and G7 voicings that are used pretty much throughout the book. So between those, the standard notation with the left-hand fingerings, and the tab staff with the right-hand fingerings, it shouldn't be hard to puzzle out how to play a C and G7. In general, guitarists are famously bad readers, and it seems like the majority are resistant to reading. I am of the opinion that every serious guitarist should learn to read music, and I could go on and on about that, but my goal with this notation was to make it accessible to players who can't read well, if at all, without discouraging them from trying to read a little. Baby steps, you know? Besides, for someone who can't read music, my version is a lot clearer than the original publication. You know you can get these for free, right? Yeah, of course. Giuliani published these in 1812. They're in the public domain, which means they are free of any copyright. It's very easy to find these for free. If you want to do that, go right ahead. So you transcribed Giuliani's work and are raking in the cash, if that's how you want to look at it, but I wouldn't be selling them for money if I didn't contribute any original work. The big thing I've added is the reworking of the notation I've already described, but there's also several pages of my own commentary at the start of the book, including some history, technique guidance, and my thoughts on how to approach the material. And if you don't feel that any of that is valuable, I sell the PDF version for $5 and the print book for $7, which I feel is in no way exorbitant considering this is an original adaptation of public domain material. Do you need to grow out your fingernails to play these? No, you can use your fingertips. Nails are not a requirement. Do these have to be played on classical guitar? No. A guitar is a guitar. Some have different kinds of strings, some have different string spacing, but at the end of the day, they're all still guitars. There's plenty of precedent for playing with the right hand fingers on electric guitar. Wes Montgomery, Chet Atkins, Jeff Beck, that guy Andy who always shows you his clean tone first. But to go back to the fingernails question, I usually only recommend fingernails if you're going to go all in on playing nylon strings. I still play electric with my nails. I even play bass with nails. But that's me. I studied classical for so long that I can't imagine playing without nails. And no, I don't destroy them. Should I master each one before I move on to the next? Absolutely not. Mastering one exercise before moving on to the next in a series is a terrible way to practice, really. Don't do that. Remember the 80-20 rule. 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort. The last 20% of the results takes 80% of the effort. With any of these exercises, 20% of your overall effort will get you 80% of the way there. That's good enough for you to move on to others. And what you'll almost certainly find is that by moving on and practicing others, those earlier exercises will suddenly be easier when you eventually come back to them. I usually tell my students to practice them in groups. You can work on like 10, maybe 20 of them in one sitting. Giuliani also grouped them by similar textures, and it's pretty obvious when the texture changes, so you can break them up that way too. Pick a different set each day. All right, those are all the questions I get asked the most. If you already have this book, I hope you're still enjoying it. If you haven't bought it, doing so is a great way to support what I do here. And of course, if you're ever interested in one-on-one Zoom lessons, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm not hard to get a hold of. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you in the next one.